Hi, my name is Slavic. I am an American of Ukrainian heritage. My family grew up in the Soviet Union uh, and lived through communist rule as Christians, as Protestant Pentecostal, conservative Pentecostals, um, as evangelicals. And I noticed this um, post here by a communist shell, it appears, that Candace Owens reposted and endorsed this view recently, the other day. So let's go through this. This is James Wood, some kind of Asian, probably Chinese writing, and at Kami Pami. What do you expect, huh? So here is the thoughts of a communist propagandist, Western shill, that is promoting communist propaganda. So here, let's read through this. China detains Pastor Ezra Jin, leader of Beijing's Zion Church, a large unregistered Christian network that spread across multiple provinces and online after being shut down in 2018. 6 years ago. 8 years ago. It's 2026, January 2026, right now, as I'm making this video. Zion Church operated outside China's legal registration system, refusing to join the state-recognized Christian council that oversees churches nationwide. Now, you may not know, or maybe you've heard about this, but similar to the Soviet Union, China is running a system where they want to control the churches. So, if you are, a believer, a Christian, you might think that it's Christ and ministers that follow Christ, ministers that are appointed by Christ, whether you believe in the Catholic tradition or the Orthodox tradition or the Protestant tradition. All these traditions believe that it is Christ who is supposed to be in charge of the church and control the church, and not a secular government, uh, and especially not an atheist government like the communist governments of the Soviet Union and the communist governments of China. And just to give you a little bit of background here, what the governments of China and the Soviet Union do and have done is they have infiltrated churches. And as someone that heard many of these stories growing up, what they did is they would infiltrate the churches, and they would appoint and promote people and force churches into being controlled by the atheist governments, the atheist communist governments. And they would tell ministers that they would force, manipulate, blackmail, persecute, and try to break through persecution. They would force them into collaborating with the government to destroy the church from within. Right? In the Soviet Union, they would tell ministers, "Hey, religion's going to be over by the year 1980. We're going to show you the last Christian on TV, and your job, you might as well give up. Your job is to help us destroy the church from within. We're going to destroy it from without." And through very severe, very harsh persecution in the first waves of the persecution, many Christians were killed, were martyred. They were sent off to Siberia. They were shot. They were executed, or they were tortured to death in horrible conditions in work camps or labor camps, or really destruction camps. And so this is what the communist atheist governments do. And some of these ministers remained faithful, and they died. Some of them spent many years in prison, tens of years, 20 years, 25 years. And others, they broke, right? They were not able to withstand the persecution, and they agreed, they compromised, and they began to work with the KGB, with the Secret Service of the communists, and they collaborated with them for the government to control the church. And so this happened in the Orthodox Church, in the Baptist Church, in the Pentecostal Church. And at a certain point, Christians in the Soviet Union, they rebelled against this, certain Christians, and they opened, and Protestants had an easier time doing this, as you might imagine, due to their tradition of protesting against things being done wrong, from their point of view in the church. And so they had a revival. Both the Baptist ministers or the Baptist church had a revival. Also, the Pentecostal church had a revival, and these churches were called unregistered. In Russian, "нерегистрированные," or also a common man's term would be the separated Baptists. So they separated themselves from the official government-controlled Baptist church. And so there was a revival, and these people suffered much for their rebellion against government control of the church. And the government persecution was brutal. Again, in the beginning, there were many executions, and what followed that was labor camps, decades in prison, separation from family. They would take away children from parents, and as we will continue to read here, this man James Wood, I will point out that many of the same logic was used to persecute Christians in the Soviet Union, as is currently used, no doubt, to persecute real, sincere, authentic Christians in China. And so they wouldn't outright say, "Oh, we are persecuting Christians," right? That's a bad look. So they would come up with all kinds of excuses. They would say, "Oh, these people, they don't want to comply with rules and regulations. They don't want to work with their government. They are working for foreign forces, for the West. They're working for the Americans." And they would make all these accusations. In fact, my grandmother was accused of being an American spy, and that the helicopter. There were all kinds of rumors. That the helicopters came and they dropped off literature down into her backyard, and she has a radio and she communicates with the Americans, and so she would rebut and say, "Well, where was your military that a helicopter flew all the way into my house and dropped off literature? And what's up with your security forces how in the world do I have a radio that I could communicate with Americans?" But all kinds of accusations were made, and this was used as a pretense, as a justification to persecute and crack down on the church. And the goal of the atheistic communists, is to crack down on the church because, if you believe in God, you are hard to manipulate. You're hard. It's hard to control you ideologically, right? If you serve God, then you won't worship the party, especially an atheistic party. So this is some background, and so to go back to kind of the overview of the history, as Christians rebelled against government manipulation of the church, there was persecution, but in the end, we see as throughout history, what happens is that the Church of Christ is victorious, despite all the martyrs, and maybe perhaps because of the blood of the martyrs, or more importantly, because of the power of God and the power of Jesus Christ that allows us to triumph. There have been many empires that have come and gone, that have sought to destroy Christians and Christianity, and we see where they end up. They end up in the dustbin of history, just like the Soviet Union did, and no doubt the Communist Party of China will sooner or later fall. And so let's go back and read, at this example of communist propaganda that this Western shill is promoting and justifying and running, affront and confusion against Christians, true, sincere, authentic Christians, and he is promoting the government of China's, the atheist communist government of China's propaganda and justification, false justification for the persecution of Christians. So let's continue to read. Zion Church operated outside of China's legal registration system. You see, refusing to join the state-recognized Christian council that oversees churches nationwide. So you see here, they want the churches to be controlled by the state because China obviously controls this. Let's read it. Christian council, state-recognized Christian council, and no doubt the Secret Service of China is all over that, as they were in the Soviet Union through the KGB and through other organizations, structures, governmental structures like the authority over religious cults, they called it. Уполномоченный по религиозным культам was the term in Russian. And there was a party person for each region that would coordinate this persecution of Christians. And they would seek to control the church, like the government decides who is allowed to be baptized, who is allowed to be a minister, who is allowed to be part of the church's local council of brothers that decide various questions, ministers, who is allowed to preach in the church. They would mandate and tell churches, don't pray for persecuted Christians inside the country, because there are no persecuted Christians. No one's persecuted, as you'll see here further down in this propaganda. They say, no one's persecuted for Christianity. They're persecuted for breaking the law. Well, the law is to break. If the law is to break God's law, then we cannot obey men more than we can obey. Then we obey God, and that is, we have that example in the New Testament when the apostle Peter and John were commanded by the authorities of their day, the Pharisees and Sadducees. They were commanded, don't preach in the name of Jesus. And he said, well, judge for yourself. Who should we obey more, you or God? And so let's continue to read this. While freedom of belief is protected in China, only government-controlled freedom of belief. It's an oxymoron. Unregistered religious organizations are illegal because they fall outside transparency. That's because if you're transparent and openly Christian, you will be persecuted, right? So you cannot be as openly Christian in China as you can be in the United States or in other Western countries. Oversight, so they fall outside transparency, government oversight of churches, controlling internal, of government controlling internal church and spiritual matters, and accountability laws. Ezra Jin's network grew into one of the largest underground congregations in the country, raising funds, preaching online, and expanding without approval. So you see, you need government approval to serve God, and obviously how to serve God according to them. Something no government would permit indefinitely. In reality, these Christians most likely are just trying to live a good Christian moral life, and they don't want to be praising the dictator of China. They don't want to be praising the communist ideology of China because they follow Christ and not communist leaders and dictators and murderers, oppressors of the people of China. China allows all faiths, Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, Taoism, but none are allowed to become politically or financially powerful enough to rival the state. Now, this definition here, right, there in the opinion or perspective of the Communist Party, rivaling the state is not worshiping the state. Rivaling the state is having an opinion and being willing to share an opinion that is contrary to the government mandated opinion that you must have. And also, all this surface level freedom of religion is just that. It's only surface level. In the West, churches can become megacorporation, tax exempt, massively funded, and politically influential, lobbying governments, shaping policy, and amassing billions of untaxed donations. So, no doubt, good freedoms can be abused, right? And we see that there are people that are doing it for their own financial gain. We do have, the I forget the names, but you get the mega churches. And not that big churches are bad in them of themselves, but there are those that are more financially geared, and you see ministers, so-called, living in luxury, etc. But just because freedom can be abused doesn't mean that we should prefer the Chinese authoritarian model, where they crack down and don't allow you to live according to your conscience. Uh, in the West, churches, okay, let's see, we read that. Just because churches run freely in the West doesn't mean every nation should allow that path. So you see, he's justifying China not having freedom of religion. Western media are portraying Ezra as a victim. He is a victim. He's being persecuted by the communists, ignoring the fact that he knowingly broke the law. Well, it's if you want to serve God and not be controlled in matters of faith by the Communist Atheist Party of China, well, then you're breaking the law, right? So this is the sleight of hand that's being played here. He wasn't punished for his faith. You see, he wasn't being punished for his faith, but for operating outside of the rules that every religion in China must follow. Well, the rules of for religion in China are authoritarian, and they want to mandate for you to violate your conscience. China's system simply prevents religion from being a tool of power. It doesn't fear Christianity. It obviously does, because that's why it wants to control it. It fears corruption and manipulation hiding behind it. Now, of course, this is highly ironic coming from the Communist Party of China, talking about corruption and manipulation, because as we know that communist systems, they are built on corruption and manipulation. And in fact, that's why when people come from post-Soviet, post-communist countries, they kind of carry that baggage with them of that you have to play the system to survive. And that's something that you have to resist. Now, I'd like to point out that, of all people, Candace Owens has endorsed this opinion here. So let's read what Candace Owens says here. As my episode yesterday revealed, under the guise of spreading Christianity and establishing churches, the Mossad and CIA are infiltrating countries. It's both a historical and present fact that they are also engaging global trafficking. So we see here that Candace Owens, the supposed based conservative Christian, she is boosting, and she is endorsing, and she is repeating communist propaganda against real, authentic, sincere Christians that are being persecuted by the government of China. And they're arresting sincere Christians. They're arresting ministers. They're killing them. There are reports of them being killed, and this is no surprise coming from China. It's an authoritarian government, and they've killed millions of their own people in the past. And so it's no surprise that they would do it presently. Now, obviously, they seem to be hiding it much better. But if you listen to the right sources, you can know this. And so, to fans of Candace, what are you thinking, right? What are you thinking? If you consider yourself to be a authentic Christian individual, why are you following a person that is endorsing communist atheist propaganda against real authentic Christians? And I'd like to remind us of the passage where this is going to be Matthew 25. This is the passage where you can read this for yourself if you want to pause it here. This is the parable about the judgment of God that is to come. And it talks about when Jesus comes back, he's going to separate the sheep from the goats. And he talks about those that gave water or food or shelter or visited in prison, those that are being persecuted, that are the least of these, those that are the least of those that belong to Christ. And sometimes this passage is taken a little bit out of context in not necessarily evil way, but sort of misguided way. And people say that criminals in jail need to be visited because Christ said, "You visited me in jail." But if you look at the real context here, it's talking about true believers that are being persecuted, and they were supported by other Christians that had the opportunity to do so. And so, let's read some of this. Then he will say to those on the left, "Depart from me, you accursed people, into the eternal fire, which has been prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me nothing to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me nothing to drink. I was a stranger, and you did not invite me, naked, and you did not clothe me, sick and in prison, and you did not visit me." Then they themselves will answer, "Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty, or as a stranger or naked, or sick, or in prison, did not take care of you?" Then he will answer them, "Truly I say unto you, to the extent that you did not do it for one of the least of these, you did not do it for me either. These will go away into eternal punishment, but the righteous into eternal life." And so, think about this. What kind of Christian would slander and justify slander true believers in Christ, the least of these? Those Christians in China, they have nothing. They don't have freedom. Often in China, despite the propaganda that we see, most of the population of China lives in poverty. And so they have no voice, they have no freedom, they have no wealth in the vast majority of cases. Yet they are sincerely following Christ through persecution. And people like Candace find it appropriate to slander these people and to repeat the propaganda and lies that their enemies and persecutors are saying about them. So give this some thought. Don't fall for deception of the devil, and pray for our brothers and sisters there in China, because they do need our prayer. And may God help them to be faithful, and may God help us to be faithful here and wherever you are. If you're in the West, if you're in a country that allows freedom of speech, allows freedom of religion, where you can freely serve God. There are minor persecutions. We have the neo-Marxists slandering us and calling us hateful and bigots and, all kinds of phobes. But for the most part, we still, by the mercy of God, have freedom. And may we use this freedom to serve God and to be faithful to Him. So God bless you all. This is Brother Slavic signing off here. Serve the Lord and don't fall for communist propaganda. God bless you.